Is this working? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Spencer here. If anybody is here, can you type into the thing on the side or something? I'm not quite sure if this is working or how this works. I'm going to talk for a while and hope that maybe something's happening. In any case, welcome to the first and only episode of This Week in Jihad. This Week in Jihad is a new initiative that I am doing to try to expand video efforts. I know that this video has been extraordinarily scintillating in the beginning, but I think that as time goes by, things will get a bit tighter as I learn to master the technology, get some of the new technology that I'm trying to raise money for on Patreon and that the estimable David Wood has recommended. And one would hope ultimately to construct a studio and take this to a much more professional level. Bosh, how you doing? In the meantime, the idea here is to give a general roundup of the news of the week for those who may not be inclined to read it all. And I understand that those people are indeed growing in number, unfortunately. Now, Mr. Arrow Storm, or Ms., I do not know, asks, is there any hope for Europe? And I think that's a good place to start. Is there hope for Europe? Is there hope for any place? You may not know this about me, but I was born in South Carolina, and the great state of South Carolina has a state motto that goes by like this: Dum Spiro Spero, which when I was a kid, I always thought it had something to do with Spiro Agnew and calling him dumb. But actually, Dum Spiro Spero means while I breathe, I hope. And I think that's a good motto to live by, even if you weren't born in the great state of South Carolina. The Dum Spiro Spero motto is an acknowledgement that, as the sage philosopher Yogi Berra said, it ain't over till it's over. It's never done. Even if Sharia states are established in Europe, it's never over. In my new book, The History of Jihad, From Muhammad to ISIS, that you may have heard of, that I happen to have right here, that will be out in self-respecting bookstores on Tuesday, the story of Pelayo, I think, is one that everybody should become acquainted with. Pelayo was a Visigothic Christian in Spain, and in 718, Spain had been almost entirely conquered by the Muslim invaders from North Africa under the command of Tariq ibn Ziyad. And the conquest of Spain was something that Pelayo, practically alone among the Christians of Spain, was not willing to accept. He was not willing to say, okay, Spain is an Islamic entity now. It was soon to become the site of the Caliphate of Cordoba, a remnant of the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyads lost to the Abbasids in the year 750, but then an Umayyad dignitary went to Spain and reestablished an Umayyad entity there, the Caliphate of Cordoba, that lasted until 1031. But in any case, Pelayo was not willing to accept any of this, and he was pretty much the only one. He went up on top of a high mountain with a tiny band of followers. The jihadis tried to get to him there several times. They were not successful. Ultimately, they decided it just wasn't cost effective, and it wasn't effective in terms of manpower, to keep trying to get to what they called a band of barbarians perched on a rock. They wanted to carry the jihad into France, which they did, ultimately losing to Charles Martel in 732. And so they figured it was safe to bypass and ignore Pelayo, and they did. And Pelayo, meanwhile, carried out a series of attacks upon them, guerrilla harassment of their forces, the jihadi forces, and ultimately was able to expand his domains and expand them steadily until ultimately, of course, skipping far forward, and the details of this all are in the book, 700 years later, the Muslim presence in Spain, the Muslim hegemony over Spain was ended. Now, Are we in for something like that in Europe now? That is entirely possible. But at the same time, there are very good signs, positive signs from the Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, Poland, that they are not accepting the Muslim migrant influx. They're not accepting the Islamization of their cultures, and they are going to resist the European Union's pressure on this. This is all to the good. This could lead to more. There is Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, who is still a significant presence in the politics of that country, and growing also. There are the Sweden Democrats, even in Sweden, which is very much on the ropes. It ain't over till it's over means essentially, or doom spiro sparrow in this case, that there is no time at which free people cannot fight for freedom. There is no situation in which it will be too late to fight for freedom. There is no time at which a free society will be completely unattainable. And so, no, it's not too late for Europe. The big news this week is, of course, Tommy Robinson being released. Tommy Robinson being released is an extraordinarily good sign regarding the police state that is incipient in Great Britain. Tommy was initially jailed summarily after only hours after being arrested and sentenced to 13 months in prison because he was live streaming outside of the trial of a Muslim rape gang. And people say, legalists will say, sticklers for the law will say, and let's remember that the Nazis also did everything legal. Everything they did was legal by the laws that they had passed. And so it is in the UK in this case. The UK had issued an injunction telling Tommy that he couldn't live stream outside the trials of Muslim rape gangs. Why did they issue that injunction? Because they knew that the rape gangs were able to operate for years with impunity because the British authorities were afraid to stop them for fear of being called racist and Islamophobic. Tommy was an inconvenient person for these British authorities. He was bringing to light the actions of the Muslim rape gangs, which often, by the words of the rapists themselves, were done in accord with the Quran statements about the permissibility of taking infidel women as sex slaves. You can find that in chapter 4, verse 3, chapter 4, verse 24, chapter 23, verses 1 to 6, chapter 33, verse 50, and chapter 70, verse 30 of the Quran. He was shedding light on the fact that these gangs had been able to operate with impunity while the authorities were so cowardly, pusillanimous, afraid to act, sacrificing thousands of the young girls of their nation, that is the future of their country, for fear of being called Islamophobic. So they told him he couldn't do this. He did it anyway. He was jailed. Many people on the left were saying, well, see, he broke the law, which, as far as I'm concerned, is like breaking one of the Nuremberg laws in Germany. It was a law with no justice. So finally, even a British court saw that this week and freed him, noting that the trial had been hasty and it was clearly done in an effort to get Tommy out of the way. Now, of course, Tommy Robinson since then has given several interviews where it is now very clear that he was wildly mistreated in the British prison. He's lost 40 pounds in 2 months. He didn't eat because the Muslim prisoners were, he was, of course, transferred to a prison with a high Muslim population. The Muslim prisoners were preparing his dinner. Then they would be taunting him, saying, Tommy, how'd you like your dinner? Which was a tip-off that he shouldn't eat it. He didn't eat it. He wanted to buy food from the commissary and was forbidden. And so he was essentially unable to eat. There was a great deal more spit and feces thrown into his cell by Muslim inmates and so on. The British authorities clearly wanted this to happen. The British authorities wanted the Muslim prisoners to terrorize Tommy Robinson, possibly even to kill him. They want him out of the way. It reminds me of Thomas à Becket and that king. Which king was it? Somebody will tell me. Saying, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest? And nowadays, the British authorities are acting in just the same way. They want to be rid of this meddlesome human rights activist that they smear as a white nationalist and far right and all that nonsense. It's good that they've released him, but it's extremely disquieting that he was persecuted in prison. It is extremely dangerous that Britain is attempting apparently to criminalize or at least to persecute those who call attention to the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat. And so it's not at all clear that Theresa May's government has any commitment to the freedom of speech, or that any government that succeeded it, unless, which is of course virtually inconceivable, that government were of the UK Independence Party, UKIP, or Anne-Marie Waters' party. It's no government succeeding May's is going to be committed to the freedom of speech either. Britain is dying as a free society before our very eyes, and it is that bodes extremely ill for the rest of the free world. We have now, of course, the Trump administration in the United States, which has come out yet again for the freedom of speech and for the right of people. For the president, of course, himself has affirmed that the problem is having to do with Islam. He uses the terms radical Islamic terrorism. Of course, there's nothing actually radical about it. It's mainstream and Islamic teaching. And as I show in the book, it's something that Muslims have performed more or less constantly throughout Islamic history. There's been jihad warfare all over the world for 14 centuries. But nonetheless, that's a sharp departure from the practice of his predecessor to say that this has nothing to do with Islam. And consequently, it is a sign of hope that we're not going down the same road. We also have to remember, of course, that when Donald Trump was elected president, Barack Obama said, this is just a speed bump on our road to whatever, progress or internationalism or whatever it was he said. So we can only hope that we can make it into not a speed bump, but something that is a clear challenge to the socialist internationalists who are trying to destroy freedom in Britain and all over Europe, and to criminalize criticism of Islam so that the foolhardiness, the suicidal foolishness of their Muslim migrant project is not laid bare to the world, as it obviously is. Henry II, King of England. Thank you, John D. Horton. Henry II, King of England, was the guy who said, I'm taking John D. Horton's word for it here. So anyway, John, I hope you're a trustworthy fellow, but I kind of think you're right about this. It was Henry II, King of England, who told Thomas, who asked his noblemen, were they really all that noble, ladies and gentlemen, who asked them, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest, regarding Thomas à Becket. Wikipedia says so. Thanks, John. I don't like Wikipedia. I don't trust Wikipedia, but they are actually usually reliable about historical issues. It's just when you get to anything regarding contemporary issues, anything regarding modern day controversies, Wikipedia is out to lunch. Take, for example, anybody who is conservative or anybody who's opposed to jihad terror. Their pages are just long lists of every negative thing they can find that anybody's ever said about them. But then you go to people on the other side, Islamic apologists and converts to Islam, covert and overt, that speak about how Islam is peace and wonderful and so on. John Esposito, Karen Armstrong, Muslim converts like Nathan Lean and others. And they, their pages, oh, well, there's nothing they can do wrong. And of course, the cultural rot is very deep, and the left has penetrated virtually everywhere to spread their nonsense. And so I suppose this should be no surprise. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in this. Let me use this little bar and move up. Yes, not seeing any questions unless I'm missing something. But anyway, so Wikislam is good. Yeah, Wikislam is generally very reliable and is good to find Islamic sources regarding various Islamic practices. If you hear somebody saying that such and such a practice, say female genital mutilation, is not Islamic, which we hear routinely. For example, even many human rights organizations in the United States that are fighting to get FGM banned, fighting to keep the practice from spreading, fighting to stop people from practicing it, even they insist, oh, it has nothing to do with Islam. It's a cultural practice, an African practice, and so on. And that's not the case. There are hadiths or reports of Muhammad's words and deeds that Muslims consider authentic, that have Muhammad speaking about how women should be circumcised, or that is, have their genitals mutilated. And this is something that these rights organizations ignore at their own peril. Of course, they want to be politically correct. They want to get entree into circles that aren't considered or smeared as far right and so on. And so they say these things like this has nothing to do with Islam. But the problem is, if they're really trying to get Muslims to stop doing it, it's not going to help if they say, oh, this is not healthy for you, or this will cause you problems, or this will take away sexual pleasure, or this will do any number of things. Nobody's going to care if you believe in Allah and Muhammad as his prophet, and Muhammad says this was a good thing to do. Then it doesn't matter if it hurts or if it's bad for you in some way. Allah wants it. That's it. You're going to fry in hell forever and have molten lead poured down your throat if you don't do it. So to say these practices are not Islamic is counterproductive. If you really want any eradication of the practice, you have to confront that. And you have to go back to first principles and say, well, maybe Muhammad's not such an excellent example. But of course, nobody wants to go there. That's like the third rail in the public discourse. And it's the worst thing you can say, worse than racial epithets, that some part of Islam, some practice that is sanctified by the Quran or the teachings of Muhammad is something that's wrong. And this is why we're in the fix we're in. Anyway, what else do we have here? A church that was in Saudi Arabia 2 months ago. It was 200 years after Christ. I don't know what that means. Churches are forbidden in Saudi Arabia. There are no churches in Saudi Arabia. This is because Muhammad said on his deathbed, I will take all the Jews and Christians, I will expel all the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. The Saudis take that very seriously. And so they do not allow any Christian practice or any Jewish practice or practice of any other religion in Saudi Arabia. There is no other religion but Islam in Saudi Arabia. What do I think about Ayaan Hirsi Ali? She's a very nice lady, does very good work. She gave a very warm endorsement to my last book, Confessions of an Islamophobe, and I'm grateful to her for that. No, the Battle of Lepanto was not the last time Islam has come this close to taking Europe. That was Vienna, 1683, 112 years after the Battle of Lepanto. The Ottoman jihadis were at Vienna besieging the Austrians, and the Polish king, of course, Jan Sobieski, came down and saved the day. It's all in the book, The History of Jihad, from Muhammad to ISIS. And of course, probably many of you already know that this was on September 11th, 1683. It was probably the 12th by the time Jan Sobieski began to roll back the siege and drive the Ottomans away. But the fact that this siege began to be broken on the 11th, many people have suggested that that may have been why Osama bin Laden chose September 11th, 2001 for the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and wherever else Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania was heading, whether it might have been the White House or the U.S. Capitol. This is because he may have been, and this here again it's speculation, but he may have been intending to signal that now they were back, that after this, the jihad had fallen into abeyance after 1683, now it was going to come back resurgent. And it is true, as a matter of fact. If you go to the book, The History of Jihad, from Muhammad to ISIS, there is a period of decline, which I'm just discovering that, oh, there it is. Okay. The 18th and 19th centuries, I treat in chapter 8 of this book, which is called degringolade, which is a very excellent word that I used actually as a tip of the hat to my great friend and colleague at Jihad Watch, Hugh Fitzgerald, who is the most brilliant writer on the planet today. And Hugh is very fond of that word, and so I wanted to work this in for him. Degringolad is a rapid decline, and jihad in the 18th and 19th centuries, which is the subject of chapter 8, is jihad in decline. And that was after 1683 and up until the 20th century, not up until September 11th, 2001, but really up until the Saudis struck oil and the Islamic Republic of Iran was able to succeed in dislodging the Shah and establishing an Islamic Republic there. And these things gave a tremendous impetus and a renewed power and strength and confidence to the global jihad that made it resurgent. And that is the subject of the title of chapter 9, as a matter of fact, Resurgence. Waving that book in front of us when we don't have ours, tisk tisk. Oh, yeah. Golly, I'm so sorry about that. Actually, the book will be available Tuesday. If you have pre-ordered it, it should be shipping very soon. And I appreciate you doing that. In any case, as I have explained elsewhere, this is a very unique book. There is no book like this that treats of jihad around the world. And I am making reference to it today, both because it's coming out Tuesday, but because there is so much information in this book that I think that most people are not aware of. There is the Quran, of course, that people know, and the example of Muhammad that people know, or at least people who are informed about these issues. But most people don't know what happened, as David Wood pointed out when we streamed last week, that most people don't know what happened after Muhammad and up to the 9/11 attacks. And so this fills that in and shows there was never a period of tolerance, of peace, of multiculturalism. It was always jihad. And so there you have it. Yes, August 15th, people are saying it will ship. Why haven't I worked with Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Maajid Nawaz? Maajid Nawaz, that's a particular case. You can go to Jihad Watch and read about Maajid Nawaz and me. Many, many articles about that. But ultimately, the answer is simply that no opportunity has arisen. And, you know, there are all kinds of people in the world that I would love to work with. But these kinds of things, they happen more or less serendipitously. And most of the time, probably all of us would prefer to work on our own initiatives or with people that we know well, which I don't know either of them well. I'd love to debate Maajid Nawaz. I'm sure he would refuse, but I will here again reissue the invitation. And yes, I am the villain from Islamicize Me. And so in any case, the other news, let's do some other news since I said this would be news. I would love to debate Suhaib Webb. Call him, tell him I'm here, I'm ready. Let's set it up. In any case, one other case I wanted to mention was a case out of New Hampshire, where in Jackson, New Hampshire, I don't know where that, I've never heard of Jackson, New Hampshire, I have to confess, but I'm sure it exists. A woman who runs an inn, and her name is Priscilla Protasowicki. And she rented a room to a couple named Muhammad Ghalami and Shahrazad Munaji. You may have gotten the idea that Muhammad Ghalami and Shahrazad Munaji are Muslims. They rented a room at the Covered Bridge Riverview Lodge in Jackson, New Hampshire, where Priscilla Protasowicki works. And according to her account, that is Ms. Protasowicki, they became enraged when they saw that there was a 9/11 first responders badge in the lobby of the Covered Bridge Riverview Lodge in Jackson, New Hampshire. And an argument ensued, and ultimately they were very upset and refused to stay there. And she told and demanded a refund. And she told them that it was not their policy to give refunds. She could give a voucher for a future stay, but that was that, which is, as I know from staying in hotels all the time, this is a fairly common practice, especially when you're standing there about to check in. And Ms. Protasowicki then was charged with assault by Muhammad Ghalami and Shahrazad Munaji, who says that she was rough with them and forcible with them to get them out of the inn. And police charged her with assault. She says that Muhammad Ghalami assaulted her and that the police ignored that. And I think there are several interesting aspects to this. She says, Proto-Wiki says that Ghalami and Munaji pulled the race card. And that, of course, is an entirely believable charge, given the constant and false claim that Islam is a race, and the constant and false claim that opposition to jihad terror is racism. And especially given the fact that anti-Muslim hate crimes faked by Muslims themselves are quite common. And I have a whole category of them under hate crimes at the website Jihad Watch. Now, the police, meanwhile, appear to have acted in this instance in Jackson, New Hampshire, the way they have acted in the UK when given reports of Muslim rape gang activity, by doing nothing to stop the Muslim perpetrators and by blaming the victim. And so also another red flag in this story is that you have a representative of the Hamas-linked Council on American Islamic Relations weighing in. They have many times said a great deal about fake hate crimes. I mean, acted as if the fake hate crimes were real. And many times, therefore, have perpetuated this myth. And see, the idea is to give the impression, which is entirely false, that Muslims are the victims of wholesale persecution and harassment in the United States. Muslims are not and should not be victims of wholesale persecution and harassment in the United States, or any persecution and harassment in the United States or anywhere else. But the fact is that hate crimes are currency nowadays. And being a victim is a big business. And if you can portray yourself as a victim, you not only can deflect attention from whatever wrongdoing you may be involved in, but you can also get special privileges and accommodations from those who may be the people who should be paying attention to the wrongdoing that you're involved in. So when it comes to hate crimes, the large number of hate crimes that have been faked by Muslims, fake anti-Muslim hate crimes, are an attempt to create this impression that Muslims are indeed the victims of wholesale persecution and harassment, thereby deflecting scrutiny from jihad terror activity and leading to a situation in which Muslims become the recipients of special solicitude because they're a victim class. And so you see, you have to go out of your way to accommodate them. And then that opens the door to all sorts of special accommodations and appeasement and so on. And so this case way up in New Hampshire, it just does not have, it doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't seem as if Muhammad Ghalami and Shahrazad Munaji are necessarily being entirely truthful about what's going on, in my opinion. And it seems as if Priscilla Protasowicki is being accurate about what's happening here. What is the most dangerous verse of the Quran? Well, you know, you say Quran 839, and that's a good one. Fight until religion is all for Allah. That is an open-ended declaration of warfare against non-believers forever and ever. You know, those who say, then there are many, who say jihad in Islam, it's only defensive. Jihad in Islam is only about stopping aggression. 839 refutes that right on the face of it, because there's no way. Fight until religion is all for Allah. How can you fight until religion is all for Allah if you're only supposed to fight when you defend yourself? Fighting until religion is all for Allah is an open-ended warfare against non-Muslims forever because their religion is not all for Allah. You see. And so most of the time, these Muslim spokesmen who say these things, they are relying on your ignorance, not you in particular, but you know who I mean, your ignorance of the Quran and Islamic sources. They're relying on the ignorance of the American public about what Islam is all about. And this is in service of making people, I am not now and have never been a Maronite Christian, by the way. This is in service of making people relax and be complacent about the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat. So anyway, yeah, 839 is a very dangerous one. I certainly think there are other dangerous ones. When you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks. Chapter 47, verse 4. I will strike terror into, or strike terror, the command being, strike terror into the enemies of Allah and your enemies. Chapter 8, verse 60. There are many, many others. There is a great deal of danger in the Quran. Let's not forget 434. Men are the protectors and sustainers of women because Allah has made the one superior to the other. Good women are obedient, guarding their unseen parts and all this. And finally, as for those from whom you fear disobedience, note that it's not those who are disobedient, but those from whom you fear disobedience, give them a warning, send them to separate beds, and beat them. That, of course, has been the impetus for a great deal of oppression and terror that women have suffered throughout history and today. And so there's a great deal more, though. Yeah, somebody says chapter 9, verse 111. That one is, Allah has guaranteed paradise to those who kill and are killed for him. And so that is, that's an extraordinarily dangerous verse, certainly giving rise to suicide bombing and more. Do you think President Trump is aware of the Islamic threat? Well, yeah. Remember that Trump has been insisting on saying radical Islamic terrorism. I already said, I believe, on this broadcast that it's not really radical, but nonetheless, I'll take it. It's a big step up from Obama denying the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat at all, denying that there was a jihad threat. You go into, and you can find it online, you go into the Countering Violent Extremism program. Countering Violent Extremism is the name of the Obama administration's counter-terror strategy, which is still in place, unfortunately. And countering violent extremism is an elaborate attempt to deny that Islam and jihad have anything to do with terrorism. Remember that I was a trainer for FBI and military groups, CIA a few times, and so on. And I would go in and teach them Quran and Muhammad so they would understand the mindset of the enemy. And it was during the Obama administration when 57 Muslim organizations, Muslim and allied organizations, South Asian organizations and others, many of whom had ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. They wrote to John Brennan, who was then in the Department of Homeland Security. Of course, later on, he became the head of the CIA. And they demanded that I be fired. And they demanded that others be fired who spoke the truth about these issues. And they demanded that all mention of Islam and jihad be removed from counter-terror training. And it was done. People find this hard to believe. I have had encountered many people over the years who say, oh, no, that couldn't be so. You must be wrong about that. But there's abundant documentation of it in my book, Arab Winter Comes to America. I also give a shorter version of it in the new book, The History of Jihad, because it is an important development in the history of jihad in the 21st century that we can't name the enemy. We can't discuss the motivating ideology behind jihad terror. That's an extraordinary development. But I remember I was on a panel, one of those great American panels on Hannity a few years ago, and I said this on the Hannity show, and this woman, I forget who she was, I'm sorry, she said, oh, no, that's not true. I was just at a State Department briefing, and there was a tremendous discussion of extremism. And so then, of course, people were saying, wait a minute, extremism? Yes, but what about jihad? And there was no mention of jihad. It was just extremism. And so this was a catastrophic development for our counterintelligence efforts, our law enforcement efforts. You can't defeat an enemy you don't understand, much less one that you refuse to understand. Do I think that Brennan is a practicing Muslim? I can tell you, I don't know for sure. He doesn't answer my emails. He doesn't take my calls. But Brennan is said to have been a convert to Islam while he was serving in Saudi Arabia. This comes from John Guandolo, who was an FBI agent at the time, and he says that it was an open secret in the Bureau. I have since also encountered other agents who have said the same thing. Everybody knew it at the time. What's interesting is that I'll debate Qadi. Have him contact me. I'll debate any of these guys. They won't debate me. But in any case, Brennan's never been asked about this, and there is an increasing number now of agents who have gone on record saying that it was known that he was a convert to Islam. And it's interesting that even though the official line of the left and the Islamic advocacy groups in the United States, as well as of the establishment right, really, is that Islam is entirely benign and has nothing to do with terrorism. And so in that case, why, if Brennan's not a Muslim, why can't he just say so? Or if he is a Muslim, why can't he just say so? What's the big deal? But the fact that this is something that has been rumored for years, and yet nobody will ever actually ask him about it is extremely curious. It's as if people do know at some level that they're not willing to admit that there is, excuse me, a problem with jihad terror, and consequently there is some concern that people would have if the chief of the CIA, rather the former head of the CIA, was a convert to Islam. But we can't have this discussion. It's just Islamophobic even to raise it. Don't see any others, so let's go on to some news story. Another news story. There is more news, ladies and gentlemen. More news coming up on the All News channel this week in Jihad, followed by the favorite hits of your top 40, whatever. Anyway, sorry about that. There's a little bit of face veil news coming out of Europe. In Switzerland, the parliament has rejected a burqa ban, so-called. Technically, the burqa is not really worn. I mean, I'm sure that there are some now who wear it, but the burqa is a garment that's specific to Afghanistan. Much more common in the West. If women are covering their faces, they wear the niqab, the black garment with the black head covering, and then the black face veil. The burqa is the whole covering of the whole body. Often they're in powder blue, and there's a grill to see the for the person who's wearing it to see out. The niqab has the eyes exposed. So in any case, it's really technically a niqab ban, but burqa ban rolls more clearly on the tongue. You know, I see some clown on this saying, I just read his Wikipedia page. I'm figuring that's probably mine. Is there really a threat of imminent Islamification in the US? I don't think so. But of course, I don't think so either. That is yet another one of these things that make Wikipedia not accurate, that they take these, make these false statements. I do not now think, have never thought, and have never said that there is a threat of imminent Islamization in the United States. It's just more of this leftist nonsense that you get at Wikipedia. But anyway, the Swiss have rejected the ban on the face veil. And in Denmark, where they have passed a ban on the face veil, Muslim women are, predictably enough, defying it. And this is predictable because in the first place, there's a statement attributed to Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. Islam must dominate and not be dominated. The Quran in chapter 3, verse 110 says to Muslims, you are the best of people, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. And the unbelievers in chapter 98, verse 6 are called the most vile of created beings. So, yes, you are a clown. Yes. Overreact? No. Go away. Now, the problem with the face veil is that it is something that comes out of Islam. It's not actually mandated. The hadiths that are the basis for the veiling of women say, Muhammad says everything should be covered in a woman except the face and hands. And the idea behind that, though, is that women are the people who are responsible for making sure that men are not tempted. Men have no obligation to control themselves. It is up to women to make sure that men control themselves by taking away the object of the temptation. So they cover themselves in order to take away the temptation. Now, that leads to more covering because a woman may cover everything but her face and hands, and a man's still tempted. And then that's going to be her fault. So she covers her face. And then one would hope get away with not tempting the man and not being responsible for tempting him. And then could be an honor killing and who knows what. So the niqab, the burqa, they're rooted in Islamic assumptions about the responsibility of women to remove temptation from a man. And so if Islam must dominate and not be dominated, and the Muslims are the best of people in joining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, then you have the idea that the face veil has to be accepted by the governments of the West, because to do otherwise would be to go against Islam, and to go against Islam in favor of infidel law is never allowed, because the Muslims are the ones who know what's right and forbid what's wrong, and the non-Muslims are the most vile of created beings. And so you see, yes, they did. No, they didn't wear niqab. They wore hijab. Actually, they covered themselves entirely. That was nobody could see the Prophet's wives. He ordered that. That was a different category. That was a different situation. In any case, the government of Denmark bans the face veil, and Muslims are going to demonstrate and say, no, we're going to defy this law, because they're never going to submit to infidel law that transgresses Islam. That's never going to happen. And it's the same thing in Switzerland. In Switzerland, they did not allow the face veil, but Muslims were already saying they were going to defy it. That didn't matter if they were going to, it didn't matter if there was going to be a law, they would defy it. Now, this has extraordinarily large implications, my friends, that go far beyond the question of the face veil altogether. The question is it possible for Muslims under this circumstance who believe that Islamic law is supreme and that the Muslims are the best of people in joining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, is it really possible under those circumstances for there to be large-scale assimilation of large Muslim populations into the West? Will not there always be a group among the Muslims who will say, no, I'm not going to obey these infidel laws when they go against Islam? And this is the problem. So Denmark has banned the veil, but now they're going to have to enforce it. And, you know, we've already seen in France, they banned the veil, the face veil, and it's not really being enforced. I think that the French police, in many cases, they don't dare to enforce it. They're afraid of Muslims rioting. But this is only going to get worse. This is a situation that is never going to get better, because there's never going to be some signal, okay, assimilate now, or accept the infidel laws over the laws of Islam. It's never going to happen. So Europe is asking for and is going to get a future of chaos and civil war. There's no getting around this. In any case, we will see how the ban in Denmark goes and how much they have the will to enforce it. Another interesting news item from this week, or just from today, as a matter of fact, is in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Iranian parliament wants to question Hassan Rouhani, the president of Iran, over the collapsing economy, which is an indication already that the new sanctions imposed by President Trump are working. Just recently, months ago, within very recent memory, the Islamic Republic of Iran was exporting jihad, financing jihad terror with the money, the billions that Barack Obama gave it. And now they've had to rein themselves in. They're getting a lot of trouble from their own people, and protests in Iran saying What do we care about the Palestinians or the Syrians? We're starving here. And so this is an extraordinarily exciting development. And I'm hoping that the Iranian parliament will summon Rouhani, that there will be more difficulty in the Iranian hierarchy, and then ultimately this will lead to the end of the Islamic Republic, which would be a great gift to the entire world. I have a question. I don't really know why do some of them say my address? Those aren't the ones from Patreon, are they? Or are they just the ones that where you've typed in my address? I don't know, boss. I'll see what I can do to find out in the next week. But in any case, it is a good question. What is the main reason for why globalists are importing Islam? That's something we can only guess at. But my best guess is that these are socialist internationalists. And the whole idea of socialism is that everybody's pretty much the same. That there is an equality, not just of opportunity, but an equality of outcome, equality of income, equality in society in all ways. And so the idea of the globalists is to erase all distinctions between people. And that includes racial distinctions, ethnic distinctions, national borders. It all has to go. And if it all goes, of course, then what are you going to have? You are going to have every place pretty much like every other place. And Paris and London and Berlin, they're all going to be pretty much as poor and dirty and dangerous and squalid as Jakarta and Riyadh and Tehran. And they're already well on their way. You look at Paris now, and all I can think of is Rick saying to Ilsa in Casablanca, we'll always have Paris. Well, we won't. And Paris is on the ropes. Paris is not a place I would ever think of to go for a vacation or a tour. It's overrun by Muslim migrants who have made conditions extremely squalid and extremely dangerous in many districts. And so what are they trying to do? They're trying to create a situation where exactly this is happening, where every place really is pretty much like every other place, so that therefore there'll be no reason to go to war. You see, you remember Fareed Zakaria in his book, The Post-American World. That was the inspiration for why Pamela Geller called the book that I wrote with her The Post-American Presidency, because Barack Obama was seen reading that avidly in 2008 during his first campaign. And the idea of the post-American world is that America is the problem, that the fact that there is a superpower in the world is the problem. And that if America were weakened militarily, economically, and politically, then everything would be okay. So that's what you have here, that you weaken the areas of the world that are prosperous. You bring in people from areas of the world that are not prosperous. You erase all the distinctions between people, most notably national borders and ethnicity. And you've got a socialist world, a socialist utopia. Everybody's the same, and everybody is just as bad off as everybody else. And that's what happens in a socialist utopia. So this is what we're coming to. And this is why, that's my best guess as to what the globalists are doing, why they are trying to destroy Europe, and very much on the way toward doing so. Now, the question about Keith Ellison, how dangerous is Keith? Well, Keith is about as dangerous as he could possibly be. Note, for example, his recent letter to Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He wrote to Bezos saying, you're selling material that is written by people who are designated hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. He takes for granted that the Southern Poverty Law Center is actually a reliable guide to what constitutes a hate group and what doesn't. And so that in itself is very dangerous because, of course, the Southern Poverty Law Center has been dedicated for years to taking people who are espousing completely legitimate positions, not calling for violence, not calling for authoritarianism, defending, as all my work has been, in defense of the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the equality of rights of all people before the law. The SPLC takes such people and lumps us in with real racists and real hate mongers like the Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazis. And the idea is to discredit and destroy these groups. And there are all kinds of perfectly reasonable and legitimate organizations that support immigration control, that supports conservative stances on social issues, and that support resistance to jihad terror and to Sharia oppression as hate groups. So if Ellison were to get his way with Amazon, you're going to have a huge spectrum of the American political scene being banned from having any say. It was a direct attack on the First Amendment, on the freedom of speech, and an extraordinary thing coming from a congressman. Now, I got to say, there's one curious aspect about Keith Ellison that I don't understand, and that is that he's leaving Congress and he's running for Attorney General of Minnesota. And Attorney General of Minnesota seems to me to be a step down from being a congressman. But maybe there's some aspect of this I don't understand. Certainly as Attorney General of Minnesota, Ellison will be able to do a great deal of damage. And one would hope that he would be stopped by the Supreme Court, overruled by the Supreme Court, if he goes too far. But in the short term, that's very unlikely. In any case, Ellison's likely to be succeeded by Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali Muslim who is extremely problematic as well. One of the things that's most noteworthy about her resume is that she actually married her brother. This is not a sordid tale of incest. This is a sordid tale of immigration fraud. And the idea that such a person with such a thing on her record would be acceptable as a candidate to the Democrats and likely to be elected to the United States Congress, it's a sign of the fix that we're in today. And it's an extraordinary situation that it's not going to lead to any good. In the last few minutes, let me see what else we've got. There is actually a breaking story out of Turkey that I thought was interesting, that the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, has said, let me get it here. Pardon me for just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to iron out all these technological things very soon. But in any case, Wednesday, Erdogan said, Turkey has no problems related to religious minorities. And this was on the basis of a joint declaration that was issued on Tuesday by religious minority leaders in Turkey, including members of the Greek Orthodox and the Armenian churches. And they said, we as religious representatives and foundation directors of societies of different religions and beliefs who have been settled in this country for centuries are free to follow our beliefs and practices. And so Erdogan is actually saying that non-Muslims have religious freedom in Turkey. Now that is a wildly ridiculous statement that is belied by his persecution of the evangelical Christian pastor Andrew Brunson, who has been falsely charged with terrorist activity and has been imprisoned in Turkey. Even President Trump has called for his release. Erdogan has acted defiantly. I think that ultimately this should lead to a reconsideration of our international alliances, which is something that I've been calling for over 10 years. As a matter of fact, I have to say, since it comes up, in my book Stealth Jihad that I published in 2008, I call for a reconsideration of Muslim immigration, of ban on Muslim immigration, and a reconfiguration of our international alliances. And the Trump administration, with the travel bans, has taken up my advice years later on the Muslim immigration, due in light of the fact that there is no way to discern a jihadi from a peaceful Muslim. And also, in regard to reconfiguring our international alliances, it's increasingly important to do so. And I think that President Trump has already taken steps to do so by placing sanctions on Turkey over Pastor Brunson and recognizing, in other words, that this is not some reliable NATO ally. This is not a reliable ally at all. Turkey is rapidly re-Islamizing under Erdogan. Erdogan has made it clear that he wants to reestablish the caliphate, that he actually has even laid claim to the lands once ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which is essentially a declaration of a coming war with Greece, with Israel, even with Egypt and North Africa, if he's going to follow through with this, with Algeria, with Tunisia. I don't know if he's really going to try this, but certainly it's clear, for one thing, that when ISIS was in its heyday and controlled a territory larger than Great Britain, the ISIS group was backed by Erdogan. Turkey has been discovered to be giving out, to have been buying ISIS oil. And if Turkey was buying ISIS oil and allowing ISIS jihadis to pass through its territory and not acting against ISIS, it seems clear he wanted to use ISIS against his enemies, Assad and the Kurds. And ultimately, he had hoped, I think, co-opt ISIS territory. And to co-opt ISIS territory, of course, nowadays he can't do that now that ISIS doesn't have the territory it once had. Remember, under Obama, just a few years ago, it was controlling a territory larger than Great Britain. That's all gone now. And we can hope that they will not experience a resurgence. But it does seem as if Turkey was on the track to try to co-opt ISIS and bring it into a renewed Ottoman caliphate. And even though that plan doesn't look as if it can come to fruition, Turkey is by no means a reliable ally of the United States. In any case, this has been wonderful fun. I will look back in this briefly to see if there is anything else to respond to. If you have asked a worthy question that I have missed, sorry to miss you. What is this stream for? To tell you about jihad activity that you likely would rather ignore. In any case, the idea of the caliphate is, in Sunni Islamic theology, it's the only legitimate government to which all Muslims owe allegiance. That's why 30,000 Muslims from 100 countries traveled to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS, because they believed in its claim to be the caliphate. And this is why the idea of a political union of Muslim countries is always alive in the aspirations of Islamic jihadis. They want to restore the caliphate. One of the noteworthy things that a caliph can do that can't be done in Islamic theology otherwise is wage offensive jihad against non-Muslim states. Nowadays, all jihad has to be defensive. It's kind of ridiculous to think that 9/11 was defensive, but nonetheless, there it is. The idea is that if a Muslim land is attacked, then all Muslims must wage jihad to defend that land. And so if a Muslim land is attacked and all Muslims must wage jihad as a response, then the American presence in Iraq at the time justified 9/11 as defensive, as far as Osama bin Laden was concerned. But the jihad groups would still very much like to reestablish the caliphate in order to, kind of like the Pope, only the caliph is Khilafah, the successor of Muhammad, not just as the religious leader, but the political and military leader of the Muslims as well. And they want to reestablish the caliphate so as to wage offensive jihad. Then there needs to be no provocation, no attack, supposed or actual, by non-Muslim states, but they can simply declare jihad against non-Muslim states and wage it on that basis. This here again gives the lie to the common Islamic apologist claim that there is no offensive jihad in Islam. Offensive jihad is an established category of the theology of jihad, and it is the highest and last form of jihad activity. There has been offensive jihad waged throughout Islamic history, as I show in the history of jihad, and if the caliphate is reestablished by Erdogan or anyone else, then we're going to see a lot more of it. It's been delightful, folks. I hope this was worthwhile for your time, and we will be able to do it again next week. And thank you all for being here. As soon as I figure out how to turn this off, I'm going to have a marvelous afternoon. How does one turn this off?